The day they threw him out, the sun was still shining. Los Angeles was loud and warm the way it always was, traffic humming like nothing in the world had changed. But inside the small two-bedroom house in Southgate, everything had already broken. Edward Lawson stood in the living room holding a small plastic bag with his clothes folded inside. It was not much. A few shirts, a pair of pants, his work boots. The rest of his life had already been taken slowly over the past year, piece by piece. His daughter stood across from him, arms crossed, eyes cold in a way he had never seen before. "You can't stay here anymore," she said. Her husband leaned against the wall behind her, phone in hand, recording. Edward noticed that immediately. "You're filming this?" he asked quietly. "For our protection," the man said. "We don't want any accusations later." Edward looked at his daughter. "Protection from what?" Her jaw tightened. "From you." The word hung in the air. Edward swallowed. "I raised you," he said. "And I appreciate that," she replied quickly, her tone rehearsed. "But things change. We have our own family now. We need space." Behind her, a small face peeked from the hallway. Emma, 9 years old, big eyes, thin shoulders. She clutched the edge of the wall as if she was afraid to step fully into the room. "Grandpa?" she whispered. Edward's heart tightened. "Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know." "I'm here," he said softly. His daughter stepped in front of the girl. "Go to your room," she snapped. Emma hesitated. Edward forced a smile. "It's okay. I'll see you soon." She nodded slowly, but her eyes filled before she disappeared. Edward turned back. "Is this really what you want?" he asked. His daughter looked away. The man answered instead. "You've been a burden for years. The house, the bills, the constant problems. We can't carry you anymore." Edward almost laughed. He had paid for that house. He had covered their mortgage when they lost their jobs. He had worked construction until his body gave out, but he did not argue. He had learned something important about people. When they decided to rewrite history, facts did not matter. "What about Emma?" he asked quietly. "She's fine," his daughter said. "Focus on yourself." Edward nodded once. He walked to the door. The man followed, still recording. "Say it," the man said. "Say you're leaving voluntarily." Edward looked at the phone. "I'm leaving," he said. The door shut behind him, just like that. No hesitation, no apology. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, unsure what to do next. He had never been homeless before, not even close. For 64 years he had worked, paid taxes, built things, fixed things, carried weight so other people did not have to. Now he had nowhere to go. The first night he slept on a church bench. It was an old building, paint peeling, doors open for anyone who needed shelter. The pastor did not ask questions. "You can stay a few days," the man said. "As long as you need." Edward thanked him. The next morning he helped clean the yard. The next day he fixed a broken fence. He did not like feeling useless. By the third day he knew the routine. Breakfast at 6, volunteers by 8, quiet afternoons. At night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Emma. He thought about the way she had looked at him. He thought about the lies, the accusations, the slow manipulation that had built over the past year. It had started small. "Dad, can you sign this?" "Dad, we just need temporary help." "Dad, you should let us handle the finances." He had trusted them. That had been his mistake. A week passed. On the 7th day, Edward left the church early and walked to a small convenience store. He had $10 left. He bought a sandwich, a bottle of water, and on impulse a lottery ticket. He did not believe in luck, but something about that morning felt different. He scratched it in the parking lot. Nothing. He laughed at himself. Then he checked the numbers again and again. His hands began to shake. He walked back inside. "Can you check this?" he asked the cashier. The woman scanned it. Her eyes widened. "You need to go to the lottery office," she said. "Why?" "Because this is real." Edward stared at her. "How much?" $5 million. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment he could not breathe. The noise of the street disappeared. The sun felt brighter. The air felt different. He walked outside and sat on the curb. 5 million. He thought about the church, the bench, the hunger, the humiliation. He thought about Emma. He thought about his daughter. And for the first time since that door had closed behind him, Edward smiled. But it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who finally understood something important. They had not just thrown him out. They had given him freedom, and they had no idea what he would do with it. Because sometimes the worst betrayal becomes the beginning of the greatest revenge. And Edward had waited his whole life to stop being underestimated. But the next time they saw him, he would not be the man they had thrown out. He would be the man they feared. Edward did not tell anyone at the church that morning. He folded the lottery ticket carefully and placed it inside his wallet, behind an old photograph of Emma. The edges of the picture were worn from years of being carried, the colors faded, but her smile was still bright. For the first time in a week his steps felt steady, but his mind was not calm, because $5 million did not just solve problems. It created new ones. He had seen enough of life to know that money changed people, and the people who had hurt him would not stay gone if they found out. That afternoon he walked to the state lottery office downtown. The building was large and quiet, far removed from the noise of the street. Security guards checked his identification. A woman in a navy suit guided him to a private room. "Mr. Lawson," she said, smiling. "Congratulations," the word felt strange. "Thank you," he replied. They explained the process: verification, taxes, financial counseling. He listened carefully. For years, Edward had managed construction budgets and contracts. He understood numbers. He understood planning. What he did not understand was how to protect himself from the people he once trusted. "Can anyone access this money without my consent?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "Not unless you allow it." Edward nodded slowly. He chose the lump sum. It was less than the full amount, but it meant control. When the meeting ended, they gave him a list of attorneys and financial advisors. Edward did not celebrate. He walked back to the church. He fixed the broken gate. He helped serve dinner. That night he lay awake again, but this time he was not thinking about survival, he was thinking about strategy. The next morning he called one of the attorneys from the list, a man named Richard Cole. They met in a small office near the courthouse. Richard was in his 50s, sharp-eyed and direct. "You're doing the right thing by coming here first," he said. "Most people don't." Edward explained everything. The house, the manipulation, the accusations, the abandonment, the granddaughter. Richard listened without interrupting. When Edward finished, the man leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" he asked. Edward thought about that. "I want to protect her," he said. "Your granddaughter?" "Yes." "And your daughter?" Edward's voice was quiet. "I want her to face consequences." Richard nodded. "We can build that." They created a plan, a trust, legal protections, documentation of past financial transfers, evidence of coercion, records of false accusations. Edward had kept everything, every message, every signed paper, because he had trusted them. But he had never been careless. Weeks passed. Edward left the church and moved into a modest apartment. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would attract attention. He bought new clothes, he paid the pastor's debts anonymously, he donated to the food program, but he remained invisible. Then one afternoon he saw Emma. It was outside her school. He had waited for days, unsure whether he should. When she walked out and saw him, she froze. "Grandpa?" she whispered. He knelt. "I missed you," he said. She ran to him. The hug was tight. Desperate. "Mom said you left because you didn't love us anymore," she said. Edward closed his eyes. "I never left you," he said softly. Tears filled her eyes. "I knew it." He looked at her carefully. She was thinner, more tired. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated. "Nothing." But Edward recognized fear, the same fear he had seen growing in that house. "Are you safe?" he asked quietly. She nodded too quickly. "Yes." He did not believe her. He gave her a small phone. "Call me if you ever need me," he said. She nodded. As she walked away, Edward felt something change inside him. This was no longer about revenge. It was about rescue. 2 days later, the call came. It was late. Emma's voice trembled. "Grandpa, can you come get me?" Edward did not ask questions. He was already moving. But when he arrived at the house, police cars were outside, lights flashing, neighbors watching. His daughter stood on the porch arguing with officers. Her husband was in handcuffs. The smell of alcohol filled the air. The officer approached Edward. "You know these people?" he asked. "Yes. There's been a domestic disturbance," the officer said. The child called. Edward looked at Emma. She ran to him. "I was scared," she whispered. Edward held her. For the first time since that day on the sidewalk, he felt something stronger than anger. He felt purpose. But as the officer spoke again, Edward realized something even more important. This moment was not random. It was opportunity. Because sometimes the universe did not just punish the guilty. It handed you the chance to finish the job, and Edward intended to take it. Edward did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He had learned long ago that when chaos surrounded you, calm became power. The officer looked between Edward, his daughter, and Emma. "Are you the child's grandfather?" he asked. "Yes. Can you take her tonight?" Edward nodded immediately. His daughter opened her mouth to protest. "She's not going anywhere," she snapped. "This is my house, my child." The officer's expression did not change. "Ma'am, you've been reported for domestic violence and your husband is under arrest. The child does not feel safe here. We're making a temporary placement." Her eyes shifted to Edward, filled with anger. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You've been poisoning her against me." Edward met her gaze. "I have done nothing except love her." That made her angry, but anger no longer frightened him. Because for the first time he had leverage. He placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "We're leaving," he said quietly. They walked away while the flashing lights painted the street in red and blue. Inside the car, Emma sat silently. After a few minutes, she spoke. "Grandpa, are you rich now?" Edward glanced at her. "Why would you ask that?" She looked down. "I heard Mom and her husband talking. They said if they could find you, everything would be fixed. They said you had money now." Edward's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "How long have they known?" "I don't know," she said. "But they've been angry and scared." Edward nodded slowly. The news had already reached them. Of course it had. He had been careful. But money had a way of surfacing, especially when people were desperate. That night, Emma slept in the spare room of his apartment. She looked smaller in the bed, as if the last few months had stolen something from her. Edward sat in the living room long after midnight, thinking, planning. The next morning he called Richard. "They know," Edward said. "That was always going to happen," the attorney replied. "Are you ready?" Yes. Within days, legal action began. Emergency custody, financial investigations, requests to review past transactions. Edward provided every document, every transfer, every threatening message. The case moved quickly, because there was more. The police had uncovered evidence during the domestic disturbance: drug possession, fraud, forgery. Suddenly, his daughter and her husband were no longer victims, they were suspects. The court granted temporary custody to Edward. Emma moved in permanently. The change was immediate. She began eating properly, sleeping, laughing again. The apartment felt alive, but Edward knew it would not last quietly. One afternoon, his daughter appeared at his door. She looked thinner, desperate. "You think you've won?" she said. Edward did not invite her inside. "You need help," he said. "I need my child," she snapped. "You need treatment," he replied. Her eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. "I know about the money," she said. "You owe me, after everything." Edward felt something inside him grow cold. "I owe you nothing," she laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't even have that investment without me. I helped you organize your finances years ago. That does not make it yours." Her voice dropped. "If you don't give me what I deserve, I will destroy you. I will say you kidnapped her. I will say you manipulated everything." Edward did not react. because he had expected this. "You can try," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means," Edward replied calmly, "that every conversation you've had for the past month has been documented." Her face changed. "You recorded me?" "No," he said. "But you recorded yourself." He showed her the folder. Messages, voicemails, threats, evidence. She stepped back. For the first time she looked afraid. "This isn't over," she said. Edward closed the door. Because he knew she was right, it wasn't. The investigation deepened. More charges surfaced. Financial crimes connected to her husband, assets seized, court dates scheduled. Weeks passed. One evening, Emma asked quietly, "Will Mom go to jail?" Edward thought carefully. "She made choices," he said. "And every choice has consequences." Emma nodded slowly. "Will she ever be okay?" Edward did not lie. "I hope so," but inside he understood something hard. Some people only changed when they lost everything, and his daughter was very close to that moment. As winter turned into spring, the final hearing approached. Edward stood outside the courthouse with Emma's hand in his. She looked up at him. "Are we safe now?" He squeezed her hand. "Yes." But even as he said it, Edward knew that safety was not something given. It was something built, and today would decide whether the past stayed buried or returned stronger than ever. Because inside that courtroom, the truth would not just come out. It would change the future. For all of them, the courtroom felt colder than the street outside. Edward noticed it the moment he stepped in. The air was controlled, quiet, deliberate, the kind of space where emotions were stripped away and only facts mattered. Emma's hand was still in his. She squeezed once. He squeezed back. They sat beside Richard at the long wooden table, waiting. Across the room his daughter entered with her attorney. She looked exhausted. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning the room, stopping on Emma. Emma looked down. Edward felt the movement beside him, the instinct to protect. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. It was not dramatic. No shouting, no sudden confessions. Real consequences rarely arrived that way. They arrived in documents, timelines, and evidence that spoke louder than emotion. Richard stood first. He presented the case calm. Financial records, police reports, medical evaluations, statements from teachers and counselors about Emma's fear of returning home, the domestic disturbance, the drug charges, the pattern of instability. Edward watched his daughter's face as each detail was laid out. Anger, then denial, then something closer to realization. Her attorney argued next. Stress, addiction, temporary instability, a request for rehabilitation and shared custody, a promise of change. Edward listened without reacting, because he had once believed those promises too. Then came the moment Edward had not expected. The judge asked Emma if she wished to speak. Richard leaned toward Edward. "It's voluntary," he whispered. Edward looked at Emma. "You don't have to." Emma nodded. "I want to." She walked to the stand. Her voice was small at first, but steady. "I love my mom," she said, "but I don't feel safe with her right now." The room was silent. She used to be different, but things change. She sleeps a lot. She forgets things. She gets angry. And when she's angry, everything feels scary. Edward felt his chest tighten. Emma continued. "Grandpa never gets angry. He listens. He cooks for me. He helps me with homework. He makes me feel like everything will be okay." She looked directly at the judge. "I want to stay with him." Edward saw his daughter break then. Tears, real ones. For the first time, the weight of her choices seemed to land. The judge thanked Emma and dismissed her. The hearing paused briefly. Edward stepped into the hallway. His daughter followed. "Dad," she said quietly. He turned. She looked smaller than he remembered. The anger was gone, replaced by exhaustion. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. "It always does," Edward replied. She wiped her face. "I was in pain. After the surgery, everything got blurry. The pills made it easier, then harder, and I didn't know how to stop." Edward listened, because once, long ago, she had trusted him with everything. "You could have told me," he said. "I was ashamed." There was a long silence. "I don't want to lose her," she whispered. Edward's voice softened. then fight to become someone she can trust again. How? Treatment, time, consistency. No shortcuts. She nodded slowly. Will you help me? Edward thought carefully. I will help you get help, he said, but I will not sacrifice her safety. She accepted that. The hearing resumed. The judge delivered the decision: full legal custody to Edward, supervised visitation, mandatory rehabilitation and counseling for his daughter, regular progress reviews. The gavel fell. It was done. Outside, the sky was clear. Emma exhaled like she had been holding her breath for months. Are we really staying together? She asked. Yes. She hugged him tightly. For the first time in a long while, Edward allowed himself to feel relief. Weeks passed. Life settled into a rhythm. School, homework, evening walks, laughter returning. His daughter entered treatment. There were setbacks, but there were also signs of change. Then one afternoon, Richard called. There's something you should know, he said. Edward listened. The investigation into his former son-in-law had uncovered a network of fraud tied to multiple victims, stolen identities, financial manipulation, even the early attempts to access Edward's investments. They were planning to take everything, Richard said. Edward closed his eyes. How close were they? Closer than you think. Edward ended the call and sat in silence, because the betrayal had been deeper than he had realized. But so had the escape. That evening, Emma asked, Grandpa, are bad things over now? Edward smiled gently. They are for us. But inside he understood something important. The past never truly disappeared. It became a lesson and a reminder, because surviving betrayal was not the victory. Building something stronger afterward was, and Edward had only just begun. The final step was still ahead, one that would determine not only their future, but the kind of family they would become from the ashes of the old one. Spring arrived quietly in Los Angeles. Edward noticed it in small ways. The mornings felt warmer. The light stayed longer in the afternoons. The jacaranda trees along the streets near their apartment had begun to bloom soft purple against the sky. Emma walked beside him on their way back from school, her backpack bouncing slightly with every step. She was talking about a science project. Solar energy. She had drawn panels across the roof of a model house, explaining how the system worked with the seriousness of someone far older than her years. Edward listened, because listening had become his favorite part of the day. Life had settled into something steady, not perfect, but real. Emma was eating again, sleeping through the night, laughing without hesitation. The quiet fear that had once lived behind her eyes had begun to fade. His daughter was still in treatment. They spoke once a week. The conversations were careful, sometimes awkward, but no longer filled with anger. Recovery was slow, but it was happening, and for Edward that was enough. The day Richard called again, Edward was repairing a loose cabinet door in their small kit. Everything is finalized, Richard said. Your former son-in-law pleaded guilty this morning. Edward set the screwdriver down. What charges? Fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation. Several counts. He'll be in prison for a long time. Edward closed his eyes briefly. The last shadow had lifted. When he told Emma later that evening, she nodded quietly. Does that mean he can't come near us anymore? That's right, she thought for a moment. Good. There was no bitterness in her voice, only relief. A few weeks later, Edward received another call, this one from the California lottery office. He had not expected it. The funds had been fully transferred, taxes settled, legal protections established. You are now cleared for public release if you choose, the representative explained. Edward declined. Anonymity was freedom. Instead, he focused on something else. He began meeting with the church that had sheltered them during their hardest days, the same place where Emma had first felt safe after they were thrown out. He had a plan. One afternoon, he walked Emma into the community hall. Workers were moving tables, volunteers setting up. What's happening? Emma asked. Edward smiled. We're building something. Within months, the project became real. A transitional housing program for grandparents raising children after family breakdown. Safe apartment, legal support, counseling, food programs, education resources. Emma helped choose the name. Second chapter, because that was what she believed they were living. The opening day arrived quietly, without media, without attention. Edward stood in the doorway as the first family arrived, a tired woman and her young grandson carrying 2 small bags. He recognized the look in their eyes: fear, uncertainty, hope trying to survive. Emma stepped forward first. "You can stay here," she told the boy. "It's safe." Edward watched her, and in that moment he realized something deeper than victory. They had not just survived, they had changed. Months later, Emma stood on a small stage at her school presenting her science project. Edward sat in the audience, heart full. Afterward, she ran to him. "Grandpa, did you see?" "I did." She hugged him. "Thank you for never giving up." Edward held her tightly. "I never will." That night they sat on the balcony of their apartment watching the city lights. "Grandpa?" Emma said. "Yes? Are we rich now?" Edward thought about it. "We're safe," he said, "and we're free. That's more important." She smiled. "That's better." Edward looked out across the city. He had lost everything once: his family, his home, his dignity. But he had gained something far greater: purpose, and the understanding that revenge was not about destroying the people who hurt you. It was about building a life so strong their betrayal no longer mattered. Because the greatest victory was not wealth, it was peace. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.